Hey everybody, welcome back. Today is January 20th, 2021. It's finally here. It's a new day. There's a new day dawning in America. It's something we've been waiting for a long time. Yes, I'm talking about the USDA Final Rule. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and on today's show, we're going to talk about that final rule. We're going to first check in with Ben Davies to get a farmer's perspective and to see if he's got any questions about this new rule. Then we'll check in with Erica Stark from the National Hemp Association to get her take on it. And then we're going to go check in with Courtney Moran. She's the Chief Legislative Strategist for Agricultural Hemp Solutions. Yeah, it's exciting. We've got a lot to talk about. I think we've got a good show for you today. And I'm excited to share it with you. First, we'll take a quick sponsor break, and then I got a couple of, minor news nuggets to share with you, and then we'll get into that big news nugget that is the final rule. Stick around. Farming is local, and so is King's Agri-Seeds. They've been screening products for local adaptation since 1993. Using the research farm in Christiana, Pennsylvania, King's is working to ensure seed varieties are fit for the East. Hemp is no different. Whether you are growing for grain, fiber, or CBD, King's Agri-Seeds has got you covered. Give them a call at 717-687-6224 or go to kingsagriseeds.com. All right, so welcome back. So just a couple of things before we get into today's show. If you have been following me on Instagram, you may have seen this amazing pair of hemp headphones. Yeah, hemp headphones. Imagine that. They're made with hemp wood. The hemp is, sourced domestically here in the U.S. These headphones are handcrafted, made by hand by the Grado family. 3 generations in Brooklyn are making cartridges for turntables and these high-end headphones. They sound great. They look great. And you should check them out. You can go to gradolabs.com to get some more info on that. I'll put a link to their page on the show page for this episode. All right, the next thing. Lancaster Farming Newspaper is hiring. We are looking for a digital production editor. So if you are excited about websites and using content management systems, and you're up on SEO and you're into social media, we want to talk to you. We're looking for somebody who is enthusiastic, energetic, and smart and all that stuff. So I'll put a link to the job description on the show page for this episode, or you can email me at podcast@lancasterfarming.com and I'll give you more information. And it is, it can be a remote position, which is amazing, So anyway, hope you know someone. So, all right, what else? Yeah, that's it. Let's talk about the final rule. Hey, Ben Davies from Wildfox Provisions. Welcome back to the podcast. How you doing?
Thanks. Doing pretty well. Just settling into the winter zone here.
Yeah, well, you must have seen that the USDA final rule has come out. Have you had a chance to look at that at all?
For sure, yeah. I've not read it in its entirety. I skimmed over it, and then I've read a couple primers that have come out from like law firms and places
Right.
like that are involved in the cannabis and hemp industries. So I think the general consensus is from everyone in the industry that while it's not as aggressive of improvements as we all would have hoped for or would like, there's still some like pretty big moves. I think that generally farmers in particular are able to breathe a sigh of relief in some regards.
That 30-day rule, that's kind of nice, right?
For sure. Yeah, definitely moving it from 15 to 30 days is, there's a whole slew of problems with that. Just the quality of the harvest in a very highly competitive market is a huge concern. especially for those who are newer to the industry and haven't even really had much of a chance to become profitable businesses or profitable facets of agricultural operations. And I think that's going to allow for a higher quality crop to be harvested. And then just, farming throws curveballs at you, weather, all of those things. Yeah, there's a certain economy of scale, I think, that can be reached potentially now, whereas before, if you've got 15 days to harvest, so you sure better have not planted too much crop. Now it gives a little bit more time to get the harvest in and maintain a certain profitability, I think.
Do you have questions about it that you would like answered?
Well, I don't have anything specifically that comes to mind right away. Again, I would have to probably delve into it a little more. I think that's on my agenda here for the next couple days. But we're happy. I think one of the things that's easy to first of all, the negligence threshold is obviously something that needs to be mentioned, which is a huge leap, basically doubling the percentage for the negligence threshold. I mean, that's obviously no farmer wants to face the slew of potential fines and jail time that has been threatened for letting your crop get a few tenths of a percentage point too high.
Right.
And that's just kind of an absurd thing. And so I feel like that's another sigh of relief, but also the huge, I feel like one of the biggest things is that the remediation and disposal changes to, if a crop is hot, what can be done there. And I haven't scoured those details too much, but it seems like it's definitely creating a little more options for folks so that, they've not come to the final climax of their entire season and having invested every ounce of time and energy into it just to find out that they have to burn it. Providing farmers with a different option is pretty important there, and so that it looks like there's some terminology that is allowing for that.
Yeah, that's positive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of we've been kind of in this limbo stage for a little while, and it feels like as we've been all scouring and commenting on the interim final rule, and so now we have the final rule, and I'm not especially knowledgeable about laws and legislation and things like that, as probably most farmers are. So what's next, I guess? What is there still, is the door slightly open still that we can still influence this in the future, or is it set in stone? This is a done deal. There's nothing else. That would be, I guess, where should we devote our efforts now? Where should we allocate our time and energy and things like that moving forward? We want to have the industry progress. So I guess that's my main question is is it over? This is the future of hemp, period. That would be nice to have, explained, I think, from more of a higher level legal standpoint.
All right, you got it. I'll make that happen for you.
Thanks.
Erica Stark, welcome back to our podcast. How's it going?
It's going well, thank you. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. These are strange days, but I'm optimistic for the future.
Me as well.
So, the final rule has finally dropped. What are your general thoughts on this thing?
All in all, I think they've made some pretty good improvements. Of course, it's not perfect. There are some things that I still have questions about, and things that still could maybe be made better. And I think there's still some obvious legislative fix that we need. Mm-hmm. All in all, it's definitely a step forward and improvements have been made.
Cool. Can you give me an example of one or two of the questions that you still have?
Well, I think it's a little ambiguous of what performance-based sampling means, something that they allow the states to do in drafting their programs. They say that as long as it meets a 95% certainty that no more than 1% of the crops are hot, that it meets their standards, but I don't know what that is or exactly what that means.
Okay.
It will be interesting, to see how states interpret that and what types of sampling protocols they put forth to get approved.
Okay, but you think that is up to states to interpret?
It's not clear to me exactly what it means. Um, I'm assuming that it leaves some room for specifically, I think, fiber and grain crops. That if you're using maybe certified seeds that come from Canada, that the testing doesn't need to be as stringent because you have that relative certainty that they'll be compliant.
Right.
But other than that, I don't know.
Okay. That's how things are set up in Montana, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. It's like there's certain tiers, and if you're in the one tier and it comes from Canada, you don't need to get the testing.
Right.
Okay. So from what I gather, it's like there's a lot in here for, like, it gives the CBD growers a lot of breathing room. But are there any like changes that the fiber and grain producers can be thankful for? Like any surprises or?
I think, and this is sort of an across the board kind of improvement, is the remediation options for hot crops. I think that gives everybody a lot of room. I think that also, like, some of the sampling protocols will make it even easier for fiber and grain. I think the people who don't make out quite as well is the growers that are growing for smokable flour. There's not very much risk reduction for them in the final rule.
Okay.
But, I think the separation of fiber and grain and the possibility for states to set their own protocols for testing will make things good for fiber and grain. I don't know that they were terrible for fiber and grain to begin with, because they are naturally more compliant. But the ability to, just cut the flowers off if it's hot and keep all of the stock material is definitely positive for fiber. And grain for that matter. Like I said, it's really the smokable flour market, I think, that has the most exposure after the final rule.
And it seems like there's a lot of states that are outlawing smokable flour anyway, right?
There's a lot of states that are attempting to, yes. Not that I agree with that, but unfortunately there are.
Yeah, that just seems sort of like anti-farmer at that point. Like, that's a great revenue stream for hemp farmers, and then I don't know.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, it's a perfectly good market for a lot of reasons, and particularly farmers, and particularly smaller farmers. It's a good market for a smaller size farm where, for fiber and grain, like, realistically speaking, you have to have a decent amount of acreage to make it profitable. Whereas, especially like in our plain sect communities, smokable flour and CBD production is definitely more suitable to them, where they don't use heavy machinery and the like.
So you mentioned the performance-based testing. Is there any other like room for interpretation left up to the states?
I think what the biggest room for interpretation is with the sampling protocols. It's been a few days now since I read it, and you caught me a little bit off guard here. But in general, I think that's the that's the most that's open for interpretation. The rest seems relatively clear cut.
Okay. So I was talking to a hemp farmer this morning, and he wants to know, like, what's next? Is the door slightly open? Can the industry still have influence on future changes, or is this like a done deal? Where should farmers and advocates devote their time and energy moving forward?
It's going to depend on what their particular interest is or area of concern. This final rule does not go into effect until March 22nd. So there is still some time, particularly with a new administration coming in. So I think is a window of opportunity. I don't think it's incredibly large, but the window is still there. I think for some of the more major things that most people would like to see, mainly the increase to a 1% THC level, and of particular concern for me is finding a way to protect hemp processors, particularly when it comes to work in progress, mid-processed hemp products that do exceed THC levels.
Right.
We're going to require legislative fixes. And there's also going to be a difference between what can be done and advocated for on the state level versus what needs to be done on the national level.
Right.
I'll be looking forward to getting input from the Pennsylvania Department of Ag as to what of the changes they can incorporate and will incorporate into this upcoming 2021 growing season. I'm assuming that things like the 30-day harvest window, the increase in the level of negligence, the limiting of negligent violations to 1 per permit holder per year are all things that they are likely going to put into effect immediately. But concerns like the mandate that they're still going to require the use of DEA labs, even though that portion of the final rule has been delayed until the end of 2022. I know there's still people who have concerns about that. Those types of things we may have to look at fixing legislatively, because there is such a small window between now and when the final rule becomes implemented on March 22nd.
Okay. All right. So hypothetically, let's say, there's super cannabis reform at a federal level. It's taken off of the controlled substance list, like the whole plant. Would the DEA still have to be involved?
If cannabis is completely removed from the Controlled Substances Act and descheduled, no, then there would be no need for the DEA to be involved at all. Is that likely to happen? No, I don't think so. It may be decriminalized on a federal level, in which case you could make the argument that the DEA doesn't have any place. If they just move it to Schedule 2 or something like that, then unfortunately it would not eliminate the DEA altogether.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with us about the final rule?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone who still has issues or concerns about it to express them, so that when we do go forward to look at legislative fixes for some of the things that are not within USDA's power to change at the rulemaking level, things like the coverage for processors, to reach out and let us know. And also on the state level, to reach out to the Pennsylvania Steering Committee, so we can work on policy and issues that are state specific.
Okay. And when you said reach out at first, you mean to the National Hemp Association?
Yeah, or, so I wear multiple hats in the industry. So yes, either the National Hemp Association or the Pennsylvania Hemp Industry Council. And if you have steering committee for Pennsylvania specific, I can get people in touch with the appropriate people there as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Erica Stark. Always a pleasure talking to you. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, Courtney Moran. Welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, I am fantastic. Hi, Eric. Thanks so much for having me today.
Absolutely. So the final rule dropped finally. And today's the official publication day. Today is the 19th of January. So first question, what is the industry reaction to the final rule, or what should it be?
Well, I have heard a whole range of emotions from industry participants, stakeholders, farmers, but the consistent theme that I am hearing is optimism. And I think that is exactly how we should be viewing these rules, is that what I see is that these rules are really a testament to the impact and the importance of effective and strategic lobbying and stakeholder engagement in legislative and rulemaking processes. Because especially in regards to these rules with USDA, we have had multiple comment opportunities with USDA, both through the initial public hearing that they held and then through the 2 formal public comment periods. And due to the comments that they actually received, that is why we have seen a lot of these reforms, and because of the strategic lobbying efforts that have been influencing the final rulemaking with USDA, I think that's why we've seen such a positive outcome with these final rules.
So did the industry get all the changes that they wanted?
All the changes, no. Many of the changes, absolutely. We have seen a lot of development and progress in these final rules compared to the interim final rules, but not everything that was asked for.
Okay. So can you sort of go over some of the highlights? What changes were made?
Yeah, so a few key changes that were really the consistent universal concerns that we were hearing about. So number one, the 30-day harvest window. The interim final rules provided only for a 15-day harvest window from the date of sampling, but the final rules actually give us the full 30-day harvest window that most folks requested.
Mm-hmm.
Another important change is risk or performance-based sampling. And so in the interim final rules, every single lot of hemp was required to be tested, and that meant every variety in non-contiguous areas. And so that would have been extremely burdensome, but also a shift for some programs, including programs like Montana and Kentucky's, who did use a more risk-based analysis for what varieties were going to be tested. And now these final rules actually do provide that all states and tribal governments can adopt policies that look toward performance-based sampling. And so that's also going to be a really big benefit for our grain and fiber farmers who are growing varieties that are known to consistently come in well below that 0.3% THC threshold. So I'm very happy to see that to really help develop our grain and fiber industry, but also that, you know, this should actually be a big help to our labs and to our agency personnel, because it will reduce the amount of personnel time required. It will reduce compliance costs for the farmers, but also it should eliminate or at least reduce potential bottlenecks in our laboratories.
Okay, great.
Another new piece, actually, and this was advocated for by a lot of folks, and myself, actually, since the day that these rules came out, was remediation and mitigation options. So if a crop does test hot, that folks are given options to engage in remediation of that material so that hopefully they can get that plant back down to a compliant 0.3 THC threshold. And so it would eliminate possibilities, hopefully, for crop destruction.
That's great.
Another change is authorizing alternative disposal methods. So under the interim final rules, DEA reverse distributors or law enforcement were required to facilitate the disposal of non-compliant crops. But similar to the enforcement guidance that was adopted in February of 2020, alternative disposal methods are authorized in these final rules. And then one thing that I am most excited about is the change of the negligence threshold from the 0.5% that was in the interim final rules to 1% threshold in these final rules.
That's great. Were there any surprises for you here?
Surprises? I wouldn't say that. I would say that I was very grateful to see the changes that were made, and really do believe, and I've said this from the beginning, that in my conversations with USDA, I really do think that they want our industry to succeed. They want hemp to succeed. You know, it's another crop under their jurisdiction, and there's no reason why they wouldn't want to. But of course, those interim final rules that came out did not show that or demonstrate that for us. So I think these final rules really do provide some additional security for our farmers, but of course, don't go as far as some folks would like them to have gone. And in particular, that is in regards to still having some DEA involvement and still requiring that labs register with the DEA. Now, I will say in that regard They did delay enforcement of the DEA lab registration requirement until December 31st of 2022. So it will give some time for laboratories to actually get that registration approval. But also, and I've had some other conversations with some folks in the industry about this, and on the marijuana side, is that hopefully during this 117th Congress, we're going to see full marijuana legalization, and that by December 31st of 2022, this will become a moot point because DEA will no longer be involved with cannabis at all. Hopefully.
Amen to that. Yeah. Wow. That's great. You actually answered a few of my other questions in there.
I'm happy to elaborate.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to Erica Stark from the National Hemp Association earlier today, and she had some questions around the performance-based sampling that maybe it's too ambiguous. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So the rules specifically reference that performance-based protocol must have the potential to ensure a confidence level of 95%, so that no more than 1% of plants in each lot would exceed the acceptable hemp THC level. So while there are some specific guidelines here within the rule itself, what I look to performance-based sampling to mean is that it will really try to take into account some of the different sampling methodologies that have been adopted under the pilot programs. So for example, like I mentioned, Montana, and I know that Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley actually commented on this in a letter that they sent to USDA over the summer. The Montana Department of Agriculture, they really pushed for the adoption of a similar type sampling protocol and inspection protocol that they had in the comments that they submitted both last January and this past October, but to provide for differing type of sampling methodologies based on performance of not only the variety, but the producers themselves. And so if we look to the Montana model, they create a category system for the different varieties. Mm-hmm. And category A varieties are tested at 10%, or 10% of folks that are planting category A varieties are sampled and inspected and tested. Category B varieties are 20% that are inspected, sampled, and tested. Category C, which are a little bit have a little bit more risk, all 100% of those are required to be inspected, sampled, and tested. And then category D varieties, which are varieties that are known to come in above that 0.3, are not even allowed to be grown in the state. And so I would see models like that likely being adopted and approved. But of course, USDA lays out that any state or tribal government that wants to adopt this performance-based sampling will have to have that spelled out and approved through their submitted plan.
Oh, okay. All right. So like if you're buying grain seed from Canada and it's been proven for 20 years that it's never gone hot, there wouldn't be that much reason to test it because historically it doesn't go hot. It's sort of like
exactly.
that.
Yeah. And that's the model that's been followed in Montana. Mm-hmm. Of course, states should be looking to their own seed certification programs, to what varieties are working in their jurisdictions and their latitudes. You know, some of the varieties that are grown in Canada and Montana may not have the same outcomes as a crop grown in Alabama, for instance. Right. And so it is still important that the jurisdictions are doing their own verification on what that performance threshold is and what varieties or factors are determining what gets an exemption or, you know, a lower percentage of testing. But those different types of models are definitely something that I would foresee USDA approving.
Okay. The states that, chose to remain on the 2014 rules, when do they have to sort of come up to the new rules?
Great question. So in December, Congress passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, which is the federal omnibus spending bill that funds our government. And in that bill, the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture was able to include language that extended the 2014 pilot program authority until January 1st of 2022. So any states that have elected to remain under the 2014 pilot programs can do so until January 1 of 2022. So the 60-day approval period to have the state plan or tribal plans approved by USDA is still in place. And so, of course, they will have to ensure that their plans are submitted with enough time to ensure that USDA can approve them for a full and smooth transition on that January 1st, 2022 deadline.
Okay, and I imagine that those states have been working on those plans all along and they're ready to submit them, or do you think they've got a lot of work to do yet?
I wouldn't say they have a lot of work because the original deadline was October 31st of 2020. And so most jurisdictions had already submitted a plan by that time because the original extension of the 2014 Farm Bill was not in place at that time.
Okay.
It was in place by October 31st, but it wasn't in place by the time that 60 days was tolling. And USDA had requested that states submit their state plans by August 15th. So most had submitted them sometime in August. And so a lot of them already have draft plans that were submitted to USDA, but a lot of them have pulled them back. And so it's likely that many of them will just revisit the plans that they had submitted. And I'm sure those that even have their plans approved are going to revisit those plans and get them reapproved given some of these major changes to the programs.
Right.
But another thing to keep in mind is that these final rules actually do not become effective until March 22nd. So they were officially published today, January 19th, but they are not effective and operative for 60 days, which is March 22nd. So the interim final rules are still in play, but on March 22nd, they will be repealed, and then the final rules will be the federal rules of the land.
I was talking to a hemp farmer earlier today here in Pennsylvania, and he's wondering, like, what happens now? Like, is the door slightly open? Can the industry still have influence on future changes, or is it a done deal? Like, where should farmers and advocates devote their time and energy now?
That is a fantastic question. I think, yes, the door is absolutely open, and this is our moment. This is our opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, the changes in these rules demonstrate that USDA is listening and that our advocacy is effective. And now that we have a new administration coming in tomorrow, we have a new Congress, we now have a Democratic-controlled Senate, there really are new opportunities for hemp and for cannabis as a whole. And so some of the feedback that I've been getting from industry is that they're very happy with some of these changes that we've seen. There's still a lot of concern by many folks because there is still a total THC threshold, and that this is really signaling how necessary and important it is that we can get a definition for hemp at 1%. And that is exactly what the Agricultural Hemp Solutions Crossroads campaign is focused on. And so for those that would like to see additional reforms come in, not only from a federal congressional perspective, but also from an agency perspective, that this is how we can do so. Because the issues that we had when we were drafting the 2018 Farm Bill, Senator McConnell's office was not supportive of 1% at the time. Now that he is no longer
industrial hemp
Senate Majority Leader, that gives us a really great opportunity to push this change of definition forward. We've had a lot of support in the past. Of course, we've had amazing support from Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley, but we're starting to get additional support from other members of Congress, in addition to our state regulators, and also seeing that USDA changed the negligence threshold to 1%. This is a strong signal that we really have an opportunity right now to take action and to secure the reform that we want to see. And so I encourage folks to, please reach out to Agricultural Hemp Solutions. We need your support to really cross this final finish line, to get hemp to the 1%, to protect our family farms, and to protect the whole hemp supply chain. And so we are taking donations. We're looking for financial contributions to help support our campaigns. And we've actually set up a grassroots platform for donations at donorbox.org. And our campaign page is donorbox.org/crossroads-campaign.
Okay, I'll put a link to that on the show page for this episode.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Is there anything else that you'd want to share about the final rule, or like what else? What should farmers be thinking about when it comes to this?
I think that farmers should be thinking about what do they want not only the 2021 production season to look like, but the 2022 production seasons and the seasons beyond. So now that we have some clear, definitive final rules from USDA, now we need to not only really look to Congress for some changes and additional protections for our farmers and our agencies, but look to our state agencies and our state governments and tribal governments, and are they implementing the programs that we want to see? USDA has given our state and tribal programs more latitude, a little bit more similar to the pilot programs. Of course, it's more restrictive than the pilot programs, but more latitude than we had seen in the interim final rules. And so it's important that right now folks are looking to their own legislatures. Most legislatures are in session right now. And so if it's not too late, ensure that bills are introduced that make any changes that are necessary for your programs to expand. Reach out to your departments of agriculture and ensure that they are either revising their own state program rules or working on developing modifications to their either approved state plan or approved tribal plan or submitted state and tribal plans to make sure that the final plans that are approved by USDA before this 2014 transition, or just whenever the state or tribal government does adopt the 2018 and final rule standards, that it's a plan that is actually going to work for the farmers on the ground.
So the final rule, it sounds so final, but from what I hear you saying, there's still work to be done. So what's next?
Now that we have the language from USDA, that we need to be thinking about the next steps of the value chain and the supply chain. And so while we have secured some protections now for our farmers, we really need to start focusing on how are our processors going to be regulated and what doors can we open up for our processors and for the value chain. And one of the lingering issues, of course, we still have these lingering FDA issues, but an issue that's still very concerning are these DEA interim final rules. And so if we want to move beyond this, DEA hold, we still need some additional input from Congress, and we need to be able to lobby for introduction and passage of legislation that protects the hemp supply chain, in particular the cannabinoid supply chain, and clear a pathway for manufacturing and interstate transportation of that work in progress or work in process intermediary hemp. We don't want our processors concerned that, now we finally have this crop coming from our farmers. They're able to remediate it and mitigate it. They're handling their processing, and now they're still going to be concerned, am I going to have law enforcement interference because of the natural increase in THC during cannabinoid processing and potentially be convicted for Schedule 1 possession or delivery or manufacturing or what have you. So creating that legal pathway for the intermediary hemp is another focus for federal lobbying efforts, and something that anyone in the cannabinoid supply chain should really be thinking about supporting and advocating for. And that's what the Agricultural Hemp Solutions Work in Progress campaign is aimed at addressing.
Okay. Is there like a best way to reach out? Is there an email address?
Yes. So for anyone that would like to learn more about the Agricultural Hemp Solutions campaign, whether that's the Crossroads campaign to focus on lobbying for a 1% hemp definition, or for the WHIP campaign to address the concerns with the transportation and manufacturing of work in progress or intermediary hemp, you can contact us at campaigns@agriculturalhempsolutions.com to receive a full campaign proposal and our tiers of engagement. And that is campaigns with an S, and then Agricultural Hemp Solutions also with an S.
Okay. I will put all of that on the show page for the episode so people can find it and click on it and do
Perfect.
all those things. Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, it's great to talk to you.
Yeah,
you are
you too.
a wealth of information.
Have you been getting a lot of contact from folks about these rules?
Well, that's sort of a sore subject because I put a thing on Instagram. I put out a special little audio bit for the podcast, thinking people would call and leave me questions. And no, I didn't hear from anybody.
Really?
Yeah.
I think some people have totally missed it. I mean, I've had some calls yesterday and I'm like, oh, do you have any questions about the USDA rules or what are your thoughts? And they're like, what do you mean? It came out on a Friday. I think some people missed it,
Yeah.
But also for those that aren't used to reading, I mean, regulatory text, right? I mean, you look at the document, 300 pages. And I think that's overwhelming for a lot of folks. And so I know, a lot of attorneys have been digesting it as quickly as we can and analyzing what choices were made and why and what reforms that we still need to see. And so hopefully different podcasts like this and other information that folks can put out there are going to help all of our producers on the ground. And I think also because agencies are going to have to read through this and adopt it and see what rules are they going to have to modify, what are they going to have to modify in their plans that have been submitted or that they're going to submit. Do they need to change any legislation because of the new authorizations that were granted? And so I think people are probably waiting to hear also from their own agencies.
Right. Yeah, that's a big document. But I'm very thankful that, people like you are out there and doing this work, and it's great. So thanks.
Yeah. It's interesting. Some of the stuff that they put in there about all the different comments is really fascinating about the variations of the comments that they received. That they received over 5,900 comments between the two comment periods was interesting. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was that, and this is only the USDA programs, but the USDA programs that they have been implementing, and I just did the math, but it's like 11.8% of the crops failed.
Wow.
During the 2020 harvest season. And so I'm wondering, once more information is brought in from the different reports coming from the states, what is that national percentage of how many crops failed this year, especially because it was, majority of states transitioned to total THC this past production season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a waste, though, all that material.
Such a waste. But with these new remediation options, they won't be a total waste. So, I mean, they're allowing biomassing, folks to convert it to biomass and then retest. That's awesome. But also to, strip out the flowers and leaves and use the stalk and the stem and the seeds. So at least we can use it for more traditional agricultural industrial uses. Right. So it won't be a total loss. I think that's a huge benefit for the industry.
Good. Government working for us, right?
Yeah.
It's all coming together. Yeah.
All coming together. That's what hemp does. It brings everyone together.
Right. Cannabis loves community. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Absolutely. I love that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe I'll just throw this out there. Like we're on the edge of the paradigm shift that's going to open up a whole progressive golden age.
Absolutely. Dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it is. Astrologically, right? It is.
Oh, it is. Okay. So good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely think so. I mean, if we look to last session, the last congressional session, the fact that the MORE Act passed through the House as was, and I do think because we have a Democratic-controlled Senate, we are going to see introduction of a similar type MORE Act on the Senate and the House side. Hopefully what we see is legislation that actually sets up more of a framework than just what the MORE Act had done. It, really just removed marijuana from Controlled Substances Act, provided some criminal justice reform, some taxation parameters and things like that. But if we really see a solid framework set up for how marijuana will be regulated, potentially as, similar to what the 2018 Farm Bill did with the hemp programs, authorizing, states having primary authority with some federal guidelines, because all of that was lacking in that MORE Act. And so it will be really interesting to see exactly what is introduced and moved forward, and then how that will interplay with the existing hemp programs, what agencies are given regulatory authority and things like that. So I do think we had this incredible opportunity, and not only from a legislative regulatory standpoint, but from an industry standpoint. I mean, we've seen so much development since the 2014 Farm Bill was implemented, I mean, all of the research and development, the creative ideas coming from all these different companies, marketing, who you name it, it's been thought of, and maybe it hasn't been thought of yet. And so I think that these rules are going to provide farmers some more security, so that hopefully we can start seeing additional production of not only flower type hemp, but maybe flower type hemp for different types of cannabinoids, but also a lot more grain and fiber. And so we can start to realize some of these other industrial applications that could really revolutionize the whole world and, the consumer marketplace as we know it.
Yes, all of that. Cool. It's exciting. Yeah. These are exciting times.
Oh, it's very exciting.
Yeah. And so
the whole hemp journey has been an exciting ride. And I think that we're still just at the very beginning, and what we're going to see over the next 30, 50 years is going to be incredible.
Yeah. Good. Cool. Well, again, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Always great to chat with you. Feel free to reach out if you have anything else you want to chat about, or if you have any questions come up about the rules. I'm happy to chat anytime.
All right, that's Courtney Moran from Agricultural Hemp Solutions. Thank you to Courtney, and to Ben Davies from Wildfox Provisions, and Erica Stark at the National Hemp Association. All right, and thank you all for listening to today's show. I hope this cleared up some things for you. If you have further questions, send them my way. You can email me at podcast@lancasterfarming.com. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. We've got some exciting news coming up. I'll be sharing with you in the next week or so about some cool sponsorship things that are happening. Also, be sure to check us out online. Go to the show page for this episode for all of those links that we talked about in the show today, including that job opportunity for our digital production editor. All right, so until next time, I will see you in the newspaper. Episode 116 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.